What I've got right here is quite possibly my new favourite prime lens for Sony full frame cameras. This right here is the Bokeh Sigma 105 f1.4. An insane lens that I've been able to use to capture some truly incredible photographs with. However, whilst I absolutely love using this lens, there are a few reasons that put me off actually recommending someone buying this lens or actually going out and buying one myself. But first, I want to talk about my favourite thing from this lens, and that is of course the image quality. Also, just before we get to that, have a look at this front element. Oh, look at that. That is pure filth right there. Oh, that should be banned on YouTube. That is too hot for YouTube. Look at that. Every photographer right now has got slightly excited. So this lens offers photographers an insane focal length paired with an even more insaner, I think it's more insane, but I'm going to go with insaner aperture with f1.4, and that means your photography is going to have the combination of absolutely stunning compression and depth of field. And on top of that, because of that f1.4 aperture, this thing is quite handy in lower light conditions. I just love how telephoto prime lenses compress backgrounds without making your subject feel too far away from it, and I just love the separation that it gives you. And when you combine that with a fast aperture like f1.8 or f1.4, your background is gonna look like butter. Now of course, me being me, I took this lens out onto the streets to do some photography with it, and I did find on a few occasions that 105 was a little bit too tight, but that's honestly because this lens isn't really designed for street photographers. I'd say this lens is better suited for portrait photographers, and if you know me by now, you'll know that I'm quite honest. I'm not the best portrait photographer in the world. It's actually an area I'd like to improve upon in the future, but even with my lack of expertise, when I went into the city of Manchester with my mate, we played around with this lens a little bit, put it to the test, and even I was able to take some absolutely incredible photos with it. The thing that blew me away the most with this lens though was the sharpness. Even wide open at f1.4, you can zoom all the way into your image and things are going to remain tack sharp. This is possibly one of, if not the sharpest prime lens I have ever used. It's that good. I think this lens also lends itself quite nicely for product photography, but even more than that, car photography. Around the streets of Manny, I was able to take some really cool photographs of a Mercedes, a Beamer, a Bentley, and even a beautiful red Ferrari. I found this lens suited this territory like a king. It's so I know how to photograph, and this lens just delivered me result after result. It's seriously a beautiful lens if you want to do a bit of car photography. I don't think anybody picking up this lens has the intention of putting it on a gimbal, and if they do, they're going to need one hefty gimbal to support this thing. For handheld video, this thing ain't bad. Despite this lens not having optical steady shot, what helps it out here is the weight of this lens, which helps keep things steadier when you are shooting handheld. Personally, I wouldn't use a lens like this for filming any kind of video. However, I have to admit that this lens hands itself pretty nicely if you're planning on shooting talking heads or maybe even interviews with it. Because of that focal length and that aperture, this lens delivers some cinematic goodness. The only slight issue is, because of that, don't get excited, beautiful front element, it is 95mm, so you're gonna have to fork out some cash to get some filters for this thing. Autofocus from this lens is spot on. From my time testing it for photography, I didn't encounter a single issue. This thing is fast, it's reliable, it's responsive, it's accurate, even in lower light conditions. In terms of autofocus for video, I decided to put this lens up against the Sony 70-200 Mark II, so you guys can see how this lens performs with something at a similar focal length. I did set the focal length on the 70-200 to 105 and tried to match the framing as close as possible to make this a fair test. As you'd expect, the newer Sony 70-200 was faster and better at maintaining overall focus. If I'm honest, I was expecting the Sigma 105 to actually struggle more than it actually did. Of course, it was not as fast as the 70-200, but considering this is wide open at f1.4, I think it did a pretty decent job at locking on and maintaining focus. In the ducking in and out of frame test, I did notice the Sigma did take slightly longer to shift focus to the background and then the subject, and it's worth noting that both of these cameras were set at the same focus transition speeds. So with the image quality and the look from this lens being off the chart amazing, Why wouldn't I recommend this lens? Well, for me, it comes down to two key factors: price and weight. Addressing the price first, this lens is currently around £1,249 British pounds. Don't get me wrong, this lens is worth every single one of those pennies if your use case demands a lens of this nature being in your camera bag. But for me personally, I couldn't justify spending that much money on a single focal length. But if I somehow did own this kind of lens, I don't think I would use it that often because it's not really a practical lens to carry around with you on a daily basis. And I say that because this lens weighs 1,645 grams. It's a beefy lens, don't get me wrong. The build quality from this thing is toppers. It's built like a tank. But just for a little comparison, the Sony 70-200 Mark II weighs 1,045 grams, and funnily enough, this lens weighs nearly just as much as the 70-200 Mark II and a Sigma 85 f1.4 combined. After some prolonged use, you will start to feel the weight of this 105. I was doing a photo shoot with it, and I was wondering after a while why I was feeling so much strain in my back, and it was because I was moving up, down, left and right all around the location, taking photographs with this lens, and it made me realise that sometimes this lens is more hassle than it's worth. Granted, I am weak AF, but maybe I should use this lens as the world's most expensive dumbbell. 1, 2, 3. I'll be right with you after this set. 4. I think for most people, you're better off sticking with an 85mm lens because they're cheaper, they're lighter, and they're a lot more compact and easy to carry around with you on a daily basis. So who is this lens for? Well, I think this lens is best suited for someone who is out on location or shooting in a studio environment where they're not going to be using this lens for an excessive amount of time. The 105 focal length paired with that f1.4 aperture really offers photographers something special, something magical that not a lot of other lenses can offer. It has a really unique look, and if you feel like as a content creator you could benefit from that, then this lens might also be for you as well. I've also just realised I've been pretty much holding this lens throughout the video like this, and I must look like an absolute tit. Let me put it down. I'll pick it up in the next shot. So to conclude this video, the Sigma 105 f1.4 delivers photographers absolutely incredible photographs effortlessly. I can't say that word. Effortlessly. I was either my dyslexia or I'm just dumb. Probably the latter. And it certainly looks the part when doing so. If you can justify that price tag and you're built like the Hulk, then this lens won't disappoint. For me, in terms of the image quality, this has been the best prime lens that I've ever had the privilege to test out. And I would like to say a massive thank you to Sigma UK for sending me out this lens to test out for the last few weeks. They have not asked me to make this video. I've wanted to make this video, give my thoughts on this lens because it's something I've always wanted to get hands-on with. However, despite saying that this is my favourite prime lens in terms of image quality, I don't think it's my favourite overall prime lens. That would still have to go to the 85mm. And that's because it's the complete package. It ticks all the right boxes for my individual use case. It's a heck of a lot lighter than the 105, it's really versatile, and on top of that, it's a really easy everyday carry. And of course, it still delivers absolutely astonishing image quality. And that's it from me today. What are your thoughts on the Sigma 105 f1.4? Let me know in the comment section below. If you have got any further questions, leave them down below as well. And if you did like today's video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. It would be great to have you on board of this ever so growing community. But until next time, create, explore, and inspire. And I'll see you in the next one. 5, 6, 7. What are you looking at?